Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Open for Business with Brad Burgess, Corporate Affairs at JD.com. We now turn it over to our hosts, Deborah Weinswig and JoAnn Martin, to kick it off.
Thanks so much, Drew. We are honored to have as our special guest Brad Burgess today. He has an impressive background, including his current role in global corporate affairs, and we are very excited to welcome him to Open for Business. I am your co-host, Deborah Weinswig, and I am honored to be joined by my co-host, JoAnn Martin, who is a VP of Retail at Blue Yonder. She has extensive strategic retail experience and a proven track record across apparel, footwear, and accessories, including L Brands, DSW, and Luxottica. In her role at Blue Yonder, she is the industry thought leader for retail. Her expertise also includes merchandise planning, item planning, assortment planning, allocation, and omni-channel inventory enablement. I'll turn the call over to JoAnn now for a few opening remarks. Thanks, JoAnn.
Good morning, Deborah. Good morning, Brad. I'm very excited to be here today. As we have announced in the past several weeks, JD.com as well as Blue Yonder has signed a strategic partnership agreement in which we'll be working together to leverage our expertise of 35 years on our end-to-end supply chain platform together. So we're very excited about our partnership and where supply chain is. We know supply chain is top of mind, and we're going to help resolve disruptions throughout the supply chain for all of retail and manufacturing.
So today we are really excited to have Brad with us. He has an impressive background, including his current role in global corporate affairs at JD.com. For those of you who are less familiar, and I'll certainly let Brad tell us a bit more, JD.com is the technology and service company with supply chain at its core. The company is the largest last mile delivery business in China, and JD Logistics, and it's also the company's largest retailer, JD Retail. The company's experience addressing the challenges brought about by COVID since the pandemic erupted will be incredibly relevant for today's audience. And then what I learned a lot about in preparing for this with Brad and JoAnn is about JD Health, which is a business that's been incubated within JD.com, has grown today at an impressive scale to be one of the world's largest unicorns. So there's much for us to cover today. We're going to discuss how COVID is affecting the retail supply chain, what we can learn from China on that, and how and when retailers should begin thinking about opening and reopening for business. As always, we'll have a transcript and video available on our site in about 24 hours, and we will launch poll questions after we start the call. Lastly, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen during our conversation if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you to those participants who sent in questions in advance. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. Brad, can you tell us a little bit more about JD.com?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Deborah, for this excellent opportunity to share our story and to discuss with you and have the honor to speak with JoAnn as well. We're very excited about that partnership that you've just alluded to. When we think about JD.com, I found that it's often important, especially with people outside of China, to talk a little bit about how we had our beginnings, how we came about to be as a company. And I'll begin with that today, try to be brief about that as initial context. And so JD is about 21 years old as a company, and we started back then as an offline, a set of offline stores focusing on multimedia equipment. And our founder, who's Richard Liu, he believed in something that was fundamentally radical at the time. And what he believed in was that customers wanted to have authentic products at an authentic price, and that they were willing to pay that price. And so he believed that what they wanted was the real deal, and what he sold in his stores was real prices at that price, and he did not haggle. Now, at that time in China, haggling was the norm. Anybody who's visited China over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years had probably experienced when you go into a store in Beijing or in a tourist area where you go and you shop and you find a product, you get pulled aside by staff. They haggle with you over price. You offer a price, they come back 10 times higher. You go 10 times lower. You finally meet in the middle after about 30 or 45 minutes. Now, that's fun for tourists, but it's pretty annoying for day-to-day living. And so Richard's strategy and belief that people wanted the real product at the real price they would sell them to ultimately built a loyal consumer base that would come back and buy the products that they trusted. this is important because when we think about why consumers choose JD, they choose JD because of the trust that they have in the quality of the products from day one. And then what happened was interestingly that SARS, the public epidemic that broke out in China back in 2002, 2003, drove us to make a very strategic decision at the time, which is to close our offline brick and mortar stores and go online. So what happened was the reality that footfall to those brick and mortar stores stopped radically at that time. And then online communication technologies that were somewhat nascent enabled Richard and the team to communicate with consumers at the time. And through that process learned that the internet would provide more opportunity for commerce than offline alone. And so we went fully online back after SARS epidemic. And so our topic today about COVID is relevant because JD.com as an online retail company is born and birthed. Actually, our true genesis is from a public healthcare epidemic, and so there's a silver lining. There's a good thing that can come about due to crisis. So that's back in 2003, 2004. We continued to grow. We started focusing on electronics products. We then began to go full service, full scope in terms of category, multi-category. And what happened was another strategic decision, which I think is important to understand our story, is back in 2007, Richard again made another decision, which was again radical at the time, which was to have our own in-house logistics business. And the reason for that primarily is because of customer service. The product quality that consumers would receive and the issues that people would have in terms of damaged products and things like that, related because you cannot manage third-party supply companies. And so at the time, making a decision to own and drive the A to Z of the logistics business was a fundamental decision, which we're enjoying and reaping the profits of and the benefits of today. And so those two decisions are fundamentally led to who we have become after 20 years hence as being China's largest retailer, online and offline. And JD.com is the company that sits over top of JD Logistics, which was started in 2007 as China's largest last mile delivery logistics business, and also JD Retail, which is China's largest online offline company. And then as Deborah alluded to in the beginning, JD Health, which is now valued at over $7 billion as of the last funding round at the end of last year, is incubated within JD.com to be a health solutions provider, which now is kind of broken off and is doing that as well. We also have additional other businesses too. So I think that's a very quick summary of who we are. But I think it's important to understand the fundamentals of our business because consumers choose us because they trust the quality back from day one when we sold real quality products at a real price and it was non-negotiable. They trust us because we offer full end-to-end logistics service. And this is important because when we order a product, we get it delivered by a gentleman in our compound that we see every day in and day out. We build a relationship with this person that's unique. So we see this person that comes to our home every day. We get to know them by name. They drop our products off. They ask if we want to send something. And it's a very, very nice relationship orientation that can only happen by owning the entire business. And so this is kind of who we are. And it's why we've been able to develop to who we are today.
Brad, that's
Go ahead, JoAnn.
Brad, that's so helpful. When you think about kind of the impact and some of the innovations that have spun out as a result of some of your learnings within your supply chain, can you give us some insight to some of the things you've done to combat COVID through innovation in your supply chain?
Absolutely. I'll talk broadly about supply chain rather than getting into technicalities. But a couple of things I think that are fundamentally key is that the pandemic, which is now, well, the epidemic, which is now a pandemic, it created several challenges. One challenge is simply imbalance. So it's imbalance in the system in terms of supply and demand. So, and this is logical. You know, if a consumer in some city typically won't have access or won't need to have access to as much disinfectant or mask as they would have as a thing erupted, they're going to want to buy and hoard, right? So there began to be a lot of imbalance in terms of supply and demand. So how to guarantee that stock is available, and how to guarantee that that the product is efficiently provided and not just given to people who hoard. I think this is a really key consideration. That's one challenge. Other challenges are ensuring that consumers are protected. There needs to be a guarantee that of social stability. This is extremely important for China. There's a lot of people outside China who talk about social stability in China and its importance politically and all this other stuff. I mean, the reality is that it's just good for people, regardless of which country you live in, to ensure that, you know, if you need to buy something, there's not going to be price gouging. There's not going to be price hikes that are unfair when you get on the platform to buy them. That's another consideration, is how do you ensure that prices are fair and that there isn't unfair price hikes. There's other challenges as well. Guaranteeing merchant credibility. Another is logistical, and so JD.com has made what I call a countercultural decision, which is kind of interesting because Chinese New Year is the one time a year where all Chinese move. And so if you can imagine how huge China is, the majority of China moves from one location to another over the course of a couple weeks' time. And so it's a major mass migration that happens every year. Most people are familiar with this, but if you think about what this means logistically, it creates several challenges. But JD has made a decision 8 years ago to continue to stay in business during Chinese New Year. Most businesses close shop during Chinese New Year. I've been in China for almost 20 years. I have mixed feelings about Chinese New Year. It's a fun time to rest and see family. It can also be a very annoying time because everything's closed. I want to go get my coffee and get a newspaper. I can't go get it. You know, so I have mixed feelings about that. So it's JD making that countercultural, but very good business decision to stay open through the duration of Chinese New Year, and rewarding logistics staff for doing that. So people are willing to do that, you know, and they get subsidies, and our founder would even provide subsidies so that the people can see their kids, you know, if they're in another city. There's a lot of this situation where the parents would move to another city for better work and this kind of thing. So there's a lot of that kind of employee care. But I think this fact that we've been open for business for 8 years during Chinese New Year is very much a good foundation for us for when COVID happened, because we were one of the only logistics providers who was on site and who was already in the game. And so that kind of gave us a foot forward, I think, in being there when we needed to be. Having said that, our technology and our supply chain expertise really helped us to address these issues. So using new technology and modeling to forecast inventory. So how do you guarantee that there isn't stock issues or inventory challenges throughout China? Using different models that supply chain scientists would bring to bear, so that we could predict who was really sick, what's the nature of the confirmed cases in the relationship where inventory is located, and how can that work in real time so that we can provide the inventory where it's really needed on an updated ongoing basis. So that was a key thing. But I think so it's a combination in terms of how did we successfully address COVID. One is simply the fact that for 8 years we've been in the game throughout Chinese New Year, and Chinese New Year is when COVID erupted. That's when it erupted. So we were there. So we had a foot in, we had a channel open. Secondly, is our top technology and supply chain allowed us to find new solutions and ways to unlock some of the issues that arise because of supply chain inventory hoarding and things like that. Another is some really interesting, if we talk supply chain, there's other supply chain innovation, which is quite interesting, and we call it, well, you probably call it this too, is omnichannel fulfillment. And so what this is um, so JD.com, JD Retail has two different retail models. One is what we call 1P, the other is 3P. So 1P is our owned business. We buy product wholesale, we inventory it in our own warehouses, we put that product close to consumers throughout China, and then we deliver it with our own people down to your doorstep. That's 1P. The other business model is marketplace model, which is not that. We provide a platform for other third-party businesses to sell with us. So what we do through our business is providing that that product typically through our 1P, through our warehouses, where if people would get online and order a product, they would have that product delivered from a JD warehouse. But what happens is that when a country is in this kind of crisis, people need products throughout China, distribution is uneven, et cetera. We have this new program, this omnichannel fulfillment program, which unlocks the supply chain for offline stores, which are not JD stores, but we have a relationship with them through our technology and partnerships. And so when consumers from a city, from someplace throughout China's 300 cities or what have you, want to order something, for example, a bottle of cooking oil or sugar or rice, if it's less efficient for a JD warehouse to ship it, the technology will inform where it will inform an offline partner to sell that and deliver it to them directly. So it's really customer focused, and this is kind of a new area too that's quite exciting. And it's because of this omnichannel fulfillment that that customers can get things in as quick as 29 minutes after placing an order. So it's quite radical.
Brad, I've been on the receiving end of placing orders and getting them in an hour, which continues to impress me. I have two questions. So one, after your opening remarks, you talked about this idea of kind of establishing relationships with, those who are delivering. I've always been very impressed by the white glove service, more just around the innovation around it, and this idea that you actually build a true relationship with, those who are delivering and the platform itself. So that's first. And then secondly, we saw an amazing amount of innovation, kind of coming out of, the earlier part of 2020 around the virus, et cetera. Can you talk about, what we've seen in terms of last mile fulfillment and, what that means in terms of, the leapfrog that we might see going forward as a result of some of the innovation that was put in place by JD.com during the virus?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I've already mentioned in terms of last mile fulfillment, which is related to last mile fulfillment, is this omnichannel fulfillment, and it's basically working with partners so that consumers can get their goods as fast as they can and as efficiently as they can through our technology, and that's last mile related. But in terms of JD's own technology, last mile, there's other really exciting technologies that we've brought to bear because of COVID. And so JD.com is the first e-commerce company in the world to employ drone technology for retail solutions. And that's always been very exciting. People have always been very interested in that. Media love that. It's got a marketing edge, to it. And we've developed this technology internally, in-house, and we also sell it to our partners. And so a perfect example of that would be something that we did this past summer. We sold drone technology to Rakuten, which is Japan's e-commerce retailer, and they bought this technology because they wanted to provide a fun way for vacationers who are on an island to buy beer and brats through their their mobile phone app. So they can download the Rakuten app and they can order beer and ketchup and whatever Japanese eat when they barbecue. I'm not as familiar, but. And then that product we put on a drone and flown over to the island to give to them. Now this is all fun stuff, and this is relevant and it's exciting. But what COVID did was it provided new opportunities for us to push that technology forward a little bit. And so, for example, when the city of Wuhan, which is the epicenter of the epidemic, when it exploded, in this virus. What happened is that roads were closed, and there was poor access and inability to get into the key areas to deliver to the hospitals. So in terms of delivering medical supply, and in terms of delivering food and needed goods to the community. And so to help ensure safety with contact-free solutions, what we did was we had employed autonomous robots in the streets of Wuhan, and that's very exciting. And what's interesting is that the autonomous robots were programmed and piloted for Beijing, and so this technology is in Wuhan, which is considerably further away from Beijing, but it's managed in Beijing, and they had these fixed routes where they would be equipped with the food and the goods and whatnot, and they would go on their route to the hospitals that were in need of the products. And I think that's one thing that's really exciting, is the autonomous robots and the application of that in a new scenario. Another is our again back to our drone technology, where we have used that for last mile in terms of rural scenarios, and so certain rural areas where people are unable to receive goods because of terrain or what have you, we use drones, to send goods over regularly. And so we had used this technology to provide disinfectant for certain communities up in Inner Mongolia. And so this is exciting too. And we have just announced about maybe a month ago, or if that, about a new partnership with GRI. GRI is a major manufacturing company in China, and we're partnering with them to create 3 new robot types, which are specifically designed at handling viruses. And so disinfecting inside areas where you don't need to go in there, you program the robot, you put them inside the building, and it disinfects on its own, and other applications. And so this is very exciting technology that we've seen, that we're able to bring to bear. So we've been doing it, and we've been creating new ways to apply this technology, but COVID allowed us to kind of push it forward a little faster.
Brad, maybe you can help us understand a little bit about how your conversations and your dynamic with your employees and your customers have changed during this time. How have you interacted with them, or how has it changed the dynamics of the workforce?
Yeah, well, I think the easiest way to answer this question is about my own experience as an employee. And so the company was quite careful and quite rigorous in terms of providing health and safety for staff. And so everything was taken very seriously, because even though we stayed open for business, no unnecessary risk was taken to guarantee that we were in safe conditions. And so provision of masks and sanitizer and all of these kind of things, and encouraging us to stay home. And most of us worked from home for a very, very long time. And we're headquartered in Beijing. And so staff were encouraged to come back to Beijing at an appropriate time. But then, according to the city regulations, there was a 14-day quarantine before returning to the office. And that got extended, and we extended. So many people were working from their apartments. And the beautiful thing in China is that because of companies like JD.com and others, you don't need to actually leave your apartment. You can order food online and get it delivered very quickly. And so people didn't feel pressure to leave the long distance work scenario, or the work from home scenario. So I think that was I think people felt quite good about that. They felt quite safe, and we were encouraged, to take care of ourselves. And there was constant monitoring in terms of how people are doing, and how so where are you, where have you been, and how are things going, and it's just constant check-ins. And I think staff felt pretty good about it. And JD was actually had won awards. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but our logistics team is 180,000 strong. It's a huge business. JD.com itself is over 220,000 employees. So you can imagine the scale at which we operate. And JD Logistics is 180,000. And so our logistics team had won awards for really riding into the fire and not fleeing in fear. But the only way that we could do that was by being equipped with safety, health and safety, and making sure that 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 our needs were taken care of. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question well enough, but that was my experience through this, and I think that really helps. People didn't feel like they were um, at risk, I don't think. And even so, even being back to the office, people feel that they were, uh, I think, cared for in a sense. You know, like the um, food planning, eating in the cafeteria and stuff, and everything's kind of pre-managed and pre-planned very carefully. And in Chinese in general are quite. I don't know if you want to say compliant, but I think it's much more easy for them to comply, you know, to these kind of health and safety regulations, I think, than perhaps some people groups in the West. And I've seen that Chinese and Asians overall um, are quite quite easy to comply, you know, with these health and safety requirements, and don't seem to take issue with it.
I mean, Brad, it's really helpful because there's so many questions that, you know, not only the landlords, but also the tenants have as they are kind of getting back to, to be open for business. And also too, we're starting to see a lot of dynamics and changes in those relationships. So it's really interesting to hear your experience. I'm going to just review the poll questions and the results quickly.
Mhm.
So number one, in what areas are you investing? 60% of people on the call, the retailers are investing in supply chain technology.
Mhm.
And then secondly, in regards to your supply chain, where's your largest pain point during this time that you need to resolve is demand forecasting? Brad, I mean, what we're seeing right now, so many retailers whom, I know work with JD very closely, they are talking about how, even once they were in the crisis, they've been having a challenge trying to figure out demand and supply. How have you, at JD, how have you been able to help your customers and the company itself think about, how to predict demand?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what I mentioned uh, a few minutes ago in terms of the challenges that the epidemic brought about in terms of lockup in supply and demand. And so what we did is we brought a scientific kind of formulaic approach to it. And so I believe we call it SEIR. I'm not sure if that resonates with any of you, but it's understanding that um, it's not traditional forecasting of demand, but it's looking at a model that assumes that people who are going to carry the virus have a certain immunity, and then providing supply according to that and distributing it to areas based upon the actual need of. But this is somewhat related to the virus outbreak, and then how to manage things like spikes in demand for masks and disinfectants and things like that. That's one aspect. But I think it's really about employing our smart supply chain. We have a group in JD.com called JDY, and JDY is our smart supply chain team, and their job is specifically dedicated to providing new solutions to make the supply chain more efficient all the time. And they were really called upon to help this issue specifically. And there's a lot of details I could probably share later, and if there's follow-up questions that people are interested, I'm happy to follow up on that in terms of technically and how they did that. But there's a lot of science behind it, and yeah, and it worked pretty well. And I think we were up at like 95% guaranteed, product delivery, and I don't remember the exact figures, but it was impressive at the end of the day that we were able to manage it holistically. So yeah, I mean, it's working with our smart supply chain team and bringing that technology to bear overall.
Thank you. JoAnn, do you want to jump into the more formal Q&A? We have a lot of questions that have come in from the audience. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. So the first question, Brad, is JD.com works closely with luxury brands on white glove delivery. How
Mhm.
does the robotics or other technologies provide the same service level to customers as they have in stores?
How does robotics or other technologies work? Well,
To
okay. I mean,
provide the service
one
level.
interest. Sure. Well, okay. So maybe not everybody's familiar with the white glove um, service. Maybe I'll just touch on that quickly before mentioning some others. The white glove service is actually it's quite unique in a sense that um, uh, if you were to, you can select the white glove delivery service option when you buy a luxury product on JD.com. So for example, if you're going to buy a watch, a nice watch or something, and give it to your girlfriend or your wife, you can select the service and set a time, and a suited white gloved gentleman who's well manicured will drive an electric vehicle to the location of residence, and will go up to the doorstep and make a presentation of the product right in front of the customer to you. And it's a very, very nice service, and it's fun, and people love it. So that's what that's all about. And so there's a great marketing aspect to that, I think, in addition to just customer service. In terms of some of the other stuff that's quite exciting, my personal favorite is something that our technology team is developing, which is I believe they call it empathetic chatbots. And so what that is it's new technology where so JD.com has these shopping bonanzas, which you may have heard of or may not. Most people have heard of Singles Day, that happens on in November, and then we also have our anniversary shopping festival, which we call Liu Ba, which is 618, June 18th. So that's to celebrate the anniversary of JD.com. So in China, there's two major shopping bonanzas, online bonanzas. The first is the summertime is ours, that we've created it, and it's now an industry standard, 618. So June 18th, that's coming up, by the way. So if people are interested in getting involved in that, probably now is the time to be thinking about that. And then the other is Singles Day in November. And so one in summertime, one in wintertime. And what this is just a time of I don't know what word to say. It's a crazy deal hunting, and there's all kinds of deals that are provided to Chinese consumers to buy online, and everybody competes. I mean, it's not just us. It's all kinds of retailers. It's offline retail. Everybody's competing to win customers and to win market share through deals. And so what happens is we get so many inquiries and so many purchases during that period of time. It is just it is an insane amount of purchases online. And so JD.com has 362 million customers, 362 million loyal customers. That's a huge amount of people. What is that? That's a little less than a third of the Chinese population, but it's a massive group of people. And so you can imagine that all these people are there hunting for deals. How do you manage that? How do you manage customer service? I don't know about you, but my personal pet peeve is when I call, I'm not going to name the bank, but I call the bank in the US. I've got a bank account in the US, and I call the bank, and I get a runaround for 25 minutes through I don't know what they're doing. It's music. It's nice music, but I don't really want to hear
Brad,
the music.
The question is, how long does it take for you to actually get a person to pick up the phone, though?
My last one was 25 minutes. Yeah. So I'm calling from China to the US on my own dollar, and I get the runaround, and my last phone call, I got to person number 3, and they repeated what I told person number 1. Like, I had to repeat everything. Oh, I was so frustrated. And I don't want to be angry when I'm calling people. I want to be, I don't want to get angry, right? So I think that customer service experience is very important. So during these shopping bonanza times, what happens is there is such a massive wealth of purchases and customer service, potential customer service issues that can accrue over that course of time. You can imagine, this is not the thing I bought. How do I deal with this? How do I whatever? Well, how do you manage such a huge group of customer service inquiries or complaints? Well, we found a way to be doing that through our technology. And so this technology is such that we have this automated technology, which is empathetic. So it is able to discern the emotions of the consumer and to address it very quickly so that people feel cared for, even though it's technology, it's AI, it's machine learning and everything else, but it's empathetic chats. It's empathetic, and it's very successful. And I think I find that personally compelling. I think that's very interesting. That's one of the things that we're continuing to develop. and it also goes through our robotics, and so it's empathetic robotics. So that's an area that we're working on as well. So I think that's quite interesting. We have a lot of other technologies that we brought to bear, you know, cashless convenience stores and things of that nature. But for me, I think what's most compelling is empathetic chatbots. Yeah.
All right, I'll dive into the next question. Would it help if brand owners had greater levels of fulfillment agility capabilities built into their supply chains? And so I assume this is, kind of retailers and brands who are working with JD.
Would it help if they had greater capabilities?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, well, I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this question, but what I can tell you is that what JD is known for is for our 1P business. And so it's managing the entire process. And so part of the reason that brands choose to work with us is because we handle it from A to Z. And you can trust JD to handle it from A to Z. And so we have the entire system behind that. So I think it depends on the nature of the partnership, but part of the reason that global brands like to work with us is the fact that we manage it very well for them. I'm happy to follow up with any kind of specific questions about this separately. But I think our 1P model is quite compelling for a lot of brands because of that. They can be quite carefree because they know that there's no middleman involved. It's all JD, and people trust us.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. Do you find that, I mean, it's always been a curiosity to me, right? You have Western brands that operate in the East, right? There's so much to learn. How often do you find that they're taking that, whether it's supply chain oriented or, kind of other innovations that they're learning? How often do they actually bring that back to the West, since it tends to be, different teams who are, focusing on whether it's operations in the West or the East?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So let's say you've got a large retailer in the West who's, kind of working with JD.com in the East. They're learning a lot about supply chain, thinking differently about delivery and service. How do they kind of fluidly, if you've seen them successfully do that, take those learnings back to their operations in the West?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that, to be honest. But I think probably what they can learn is I think what they can learn is probably a lot of our marketing that we're doing, because a lot of what China does to market the brands to consumers is quite compelling and quite innovative. And so I think um, so. For example, during COVID over the last couple of months, so I guess this does in a sense answer the question, but COVID in the last couple of months, we've really rolled out some very cool innovations to help brands to launch and to engage customers. And so one example is our live stream platform, JD Live. And we've been launching a range of brand engagements through that. And so in one particular example of JD Live that I really like is online clubbing. And so what we've discovered is that especially the younger generation in China is quite lonely in cooped up, and so people are kind of hunkering down and they're cooped up. And cabin fever is quite tough. You're probably discovering that now in the U.S.
Yes.
And what's interesting is people would think that their sleep quality would improve, but the reverse has been the case. Sleep has been getting worse, and people have insomnia and all this. And so what we've done is we've found ways of integrating fun to help sell products. And so we have this partnership with a music group, Taihe Music Group, where we've launched online clubbing. And so people can go online and they can hear the DJs and they can dance up and they can have a good time. And then liquor brands are in the mix, and they're selling all kinds of liquor and beer and everything else, wine, to these groups that they can make a decision to buy in the moment that they're seeing the DJ and having the fun. And I shared this example with some friends of mine in the U.S. and they loved it. And they tried to recreate it. They were at home and they were like, "We're going to do an online clubbing session with our friends here." And so I think it's ways of engaging the consumer that are new and fun, and then maybe taking that back because I think China is really on the cusp of consumer engagement. I think, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff that we can share. Another initiative I think that is quite interesting, which is on the opposite side, is something we call consumer to manufacturing. In what that is it's basically we have our big data, and we have our it's a combination of our qualitative insight and our quantitative data, and we create portraits of what is happening in China, and we'll provide advice to brands on how to market and brand their products to Chinify their products. And so, China is consumer taste can be quite unique. A lot of times, there's a lot of Chinese consumers who want things exactly as they are in the West, but similarly, there's a lot of consumers who want things to be a little bit more Chinified to their tastes and preferences. So we help the global brands to do that. One perfect example of this is Huggies diapers. We worked with them on changing the nature of the composite in the diaper to be more sensitive to Chinese baby bottoms, and also changing the nature of the packaging and how those are provided to consumers so that Chinese moms can buy the right amount and store the right amount in their closets and things like that. So there's a range of things that we do in terms of consumer products in that area, and also food. So changing the flavors of food to be more tailored for Chinese audiences. Global brands, they love this stuff, and a lot of our brand work is C2M. We've created some significant innovations for the Chinese consumer together with global brands in this aspect.
Great. JoAnn, do you want to take the next question?
Sure, absolutely. What kind of e-commerce behavior changes does JD observe during coronavirus, and what behavior changes would likely remain as the new norm as everybody's reestablishing a norm coming out of Corona?
Well, I think so. Probably the easiest way to answer the question is to look at what we've seen in terms of data, and so some of the data that we've seen indicates that, which I think is pretty compelling from a trends perspective, is that Chinese are taking up hobbies, and so the Chinese are extremely hardworking people, and I know New Yorkers are as well, and but
Thanks, Brad.
it's a very very yes. It's a very very stressful. So Chinese city living is quite stressful, to be honest, and there's very very little work-life balance. There's very little turning it off. One is often always available, at all times, and that's just the nature of how things are. And I think being forced to stay home was interesting, because in China we have this great benefit which most other countries do not have, and what that is the ability and resources to outsource a lot of our work. What do I mean by that? So price of labor is low in China. It still is, and so there's a wide group of au pairs. I believe is probably the name that the childcare people and cooks and cleaners and things like that. And so it's normal culture for people who live in the cities in China, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, etc., to hire a full-time person who comes in and cooks and cleans and takes care of the kids while you go to work. And so it's really quite convenient, and it's quite reasonably priced. Those people are happy because they make a pretty good wage. You're happy because you can make a lot more by going to work and then not needing to worry about coming home and having to cook a meal. Chinese cooking is delicious, but it's exhausting. It takes you 2 hours just to cut up vegetables and boil potatoes and have it all come out nicely. So what happened was, because all these people they returned home for Chinese New Year, and had been delayed in quarantine and whatnot, a lot of consumers, when they're forced to hunker down and stay home, found that they really wanted to take up hobbies. They wanted to take up cooking. They wanted to learn how to bake. So we saw the sales data of, and I don't have the figures on hand, but we saw the sales data of baking products skyrocket. Baking. We saw data for hobby related stuff go up, and I think that it's really interesting that Chinese, they want to learn how to bake, and then they want to take pictures of their cakes and show it to their friends on WeChat moments. And I saw that all over the place, and And I also saw a lot of yoga practitioners with the same spirit. You know, and yoga mats went quite high as well in terms of sales. And so there's a lot of yoga practitioners or amateurs out there as well in China. So there was this rise of hobbyism. There was a rise in health, and so pulling equipment, rowing machines, yoga mats, etc. This became quite important. There was a rise in reading, and I think this was personally interesting because in China, I think it's a bit unfortunate. I'm not sure if I want well. So Chinese tend to read for a purpose. It's getting ahead in business. It's it's to get a supplemental material for your child. It's to better your life. It's in a sense. But what we saw is that there began to be a greater interest in literature, in particular things like calligraphy. Who would have thought of that? So people are buying books about calligraphy. They're buying books about literature, and I think in a sense, I found that quite nice. Just to note that people are kind of getting back to being curious, and I think getting healthy curiosity and creativity because of this. So we saw that, and I think that was quite an interesting dynamic. And what does it mean for the future? Well, I hope what it means for the future is that Chinese are going to be enjoying life a bit more, rather than just working and coming home. And I think that's a great thing to note, and I think that might be a great lesson for all of us. I know a friend of mine who shared with me that she felt guilty, that compelled to do something, to produce something, like I need to be doing something, I need to be producing something. But I think at this time when you're at home, it's really a chance to rethink and to reconnect. So it's a bit of a vague, conclusion, but I think that does offer some pretty good scenarios for everybody.
That's really
Does
helpful.
that help?
It's really interesting. And actually, it kind of feeds right into the next question, which is from one of our participants: coming out of the coronavirus, would JD change the way it does business? In what areas? Example, marketing, logistics, etc.
Well, so I think one of the things that, and I've alluded to, that we've done because of the virus is we've done a lot more of the cloud launches. There's a lot more sort of, whether you want to call it quote unquote cloud because that's kind of exciting language or not, but there's a lot more stuff online. So engaging with people online, launching products online. We just held our internal top frontline employees celebration. I think it was yesterday, online, and so that was interesting. We congratulated and rewarded the top 100 frontline employees who were working hard during the virus. And this kind of stuff is the adoption of this new way of engaging is just going to keep going, I think. And I don't know if this is the case, but I mean, one of the data points that people are talking about, not necessarily China, but is the sort of the rise of the freelancer. And I think it raises interesting questions, as to what does that mean in the China scenario? I don't have an answer for that, but is this going to introduce new fragmented ways of working and new solutions of working? I don't know. China and Chinese teams tend to be quite tight, in terms of how they work together. But I think this virus has provided new platforms and ways to engage with people and to launch brands, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. I think this coming year, especially for technologies like live stream, it's going to be a focus on quality. So last year for live streaming, it was really a focus on making it happen. And there was a lot of people getting into live streaming, but they're kind of learning. There was very uneven quality in terms of how people are using it. But this year, 2020, is going to be a much greater focus on quality. We're hoping that 100% of brands that are in our 1P business will engage in live streaming, and we're hoping that 60% of our third-party business will engage in live streaming. So that's our target for this year for live streaming, and we see that as being something that is really emblematic, I think, of something that came about during the COVID that is going to stay with us.
Those numbers are impressive. JoAnn, I'll turn it over to you for the last question.
Does the global coronavirus condition impact the way JD Global imports Western brands into the hands of Chinese consumers?
Well, we've seen that we're actually continuing to work around the world. I think we work with 105 countries since the virus has broken out. I think that's the number in terms of leaving China, coming into China. So I think it's been okay. And I don't have specific figures in terms of how it's been working out or whatnot, but we have superb logistics. It's incomparable. Nobody's better than JD.com in China in terms of this market. And that's not bragging. We can say that truthfully because it's just the nature of our business model. And so we've been doing very well. I have not heard of any issues in this, to be honest. And I would share with you if I did, but I have not heard of any. But I think if people want to follow up with this kind of question, I'm happy to follow up and get more texture. But I think things are going quite well.
Great. With that, Brad, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We could probably ask you questions for another hour, and hopefully we'll have the chance to do so. JoAnn, thanks again. This was just amazing, and I think we learned so much. And yeah, I think we'll all think differently as we're operating our businesses in 2020. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Once again, we'll have the transcript and the video up in the next 24 hours.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.